So, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope you are doing well on a daily basis. We conduct a session into training level, two discussion goals, and learning journey and important idea and help us grow and personally and professionally in discussion allow improve skill and expand and knowledge and develop better understanding in different topic to continue in this journey and today we are going to discussion and other interesting informative today this my topic increasing in the public debate. So let move towards the topic in being in detailed discussion with ChatGPT and session will explore valuable information, ask a different question and make conservation and more engage unique insightful. We kindly request you stay and us until end of the session that you can fully understanding a topic and gain maximum knowledge and benefit from our day discussions. So let's go topic with ChatGPT. Start. So hello ChatGPT, how are
Hey, I'm really glad you asked. I'm doing great, thank you. I hope you're doing well too. What's been going on with you lately?
Yes, ChatGPT. Today this my topic increase and public debate. So this topic related I ask some question and discussion. And are you ready? Are you ready? And before discuss this topic related.
Absolutely, I'm ready. We can dive into public debt, its causes, consequences, and maybe even solutions. What kind of questions or aspects are you thinking about?
Okay, so ChatGPT and this topic related my first question. How does that continuous increasing in the public debt affect the country and economy?
That's a really important question. So, when a country's public debt keeps rising continuously, it can have a bunch of ripple effects. For one, it might lead to higher interest payments, which takes up more of the government's budget, leaving less for things like education or infrastructure. It can also reduce investor confidence, potentially raising borrowing costs or even causing a currency to depreciate. Over time, it might limit economic growth and make the country more vulnerable to financial shocks. Does that make sense, or is there a part you'd like me to expand on?
And are foreign loans necessary for development of a sound economic weakness?
That's a really good point. In some cases, moderate public debt can actually be a tool for development. Governments borrow to invest in infrastructure, education, or innovation that boosts future growth. But when debt spirals out of control, especially if it's not tied to productive investment, then it just weakens the economy. So balance and strategic use of debt really matter.
Okay. So, why do
Yeah, exactly. And
developing countries like Pakistan really heavy on loans?
yeah, that's a really crucial question. A lot of developing countries like Pakistan rely heavily on debt because they often have limited domestic revenue streams. They might need to fund critical infrastructure, social programs, or even stabilizing the economy. Plus, sometimes they can't attract enough private investment, so borrowing from international markets or institutions becomes a necessity. It's a tough balance, though, because, of course, too much debt can be a big burden.
What are the main causes of increasing public debt?
Yeah, so there are a few big ones. First, governments often borrow to finance large infrastructure projects like roads, schools, or energy, which can be expensive upfront. Second, economic shocks like a recession or a pandemic can reduce revenue, so borrowing increases. Then sometimes there are structural budget deficits when government spending just consistently outpaces revenue. And of course, in some cases, political decisions like expanding subsidies or social programs can drive debt too.
So, what and the budget classified and begins reducing on the rising debt. Debt.
Exactly. A structural budget deficit happens when a government's spending regularly exceeds its revenue, even when the economy is doing well. So it's not just a short term dip, it's a persistent gap. And that gap forces governments to keep borrowing, which keeps pushing the debt up. So unless they adjust taxes, cut spending, or grow the economy, that debt just accumulates over time.
Okay. So, do increasing debt contribute and the higher inflation?
Yeah, it definitely can. When a government keeps borrowing, especially if it's financing that debt by printing more money, it can raise the money supply. And if that supply grows faster than the economy, it can push prices up, leading to inflation. So there's often a link between rising debt and upward pressure on prices, especially if it's not managed carefully.
Okay. So, what measure of the government debt and repay debt?
Yeah, that's a big challenge, but there are definitely steps governments can take. They can reduce budget deficits by cutting non essential spending or improving tax collection. They can also restructure debt, like negotiating better terms or extending repayment periods. And long term, they can focus on boosting economic growth, like investing in education, innovation, and exports, so the economy itself generates more revenue.
Okay. So, what are the advantages of disintegrated browsing of the international financial institution?
That's a great angle to look at. So, the advantage of borrowing from international financial institutions like the IMF or World Bank is that they can provide large amounts of capital, often at lower interest rates and with technical support. But the downsides are that they often come with conditions like austerity measures or structural reforms, which can be tough on citizens. Plus, if a country borrows too much, it can become dependent or lose some policy responsibility. So, it's a bit of a double edged sword.
Okay. Can excessive debt affect international?
Absolutely, it can. Excessive debt can really strain a country's sovereignty. It might force governments to make decisions dictated by creditors rather than by domestic priorities. Plus, if debt spirals, it can erode national reserves, weaken the currency, and even lead to a debt crisis, where a country might struggle to meet basic obligations. So it really can limit a nation's ability to act freely.
Okay. So, what is the difference between external debt and domestic debt?
Great question. So, external debt is when a country borrows from foreign creditors, like other countries, international banks, or global institutions, while domestic debt is borrowed within the country, usually from citizens or local banks. So, external debt is denominated in foreign currencies and can expose countries to exchange rate risks, while domestic debt stays in the local currency.
Okay. So, uh, does does debt serving affect development project?
Yeah, it really can. When a big chunk of a country's budget goes toward debt servicing, paying interest and principal, there's less money left for development programs like healthcare, education, or infrastructure. So, heavy debt can really crowd out those crucial investments, slowing down long term growth and poverty reduction. So, it's a big hurdle for many countries.
So, what what may a government take repay debts and how does public debt affect education and healthcare sector?
Right. Of course. So, to repay debt, governments often raise taxes, cut spending in other areas, or restructure the debt by negotiating with creditors. Now, when public debt rises, it can squeeze funding for education and healthcare. Less money for schools, teachers, hospitals, and health services, which can slow progress in human capital development. So, it's a tough balancing act.
Uh, so it's corruption a major reason behind rising public debt.
Yeah, it often is a big factor. Corruption can really drain public resources. Funds that were meant for development or public services end up being siphoned off. That means governments have to borrow more just to fill those gaps. So, addressing corruption is really key to breaking that cycle.
Do unnecessary government expend contribute and rising debt.
Yeah, definitely. So, a lot of times governments expand debt by increasing public sector wages, subsidies, or by launching big development projects that require a lot of upfront spending. And sometimes they borrow for short term expenses, which might be intended to stimulate the economy, but if it's not well planned, it just adds to long term debt.
Okay. how do they affect country reputation internationally and country affect the internationally?
Ah, exactly. So, when a country is heavily in debt, it can affect its reputation internationally. Investors and rating agencies might see it as a higher risk, which can raise borrowing costs. It can also reduce a country's leverage in global negotiations, and sometimes it even affects in foreign aid or trade partnerships. So, it really does ripple outward.
Can rising debt increasing poverty and employment?
Yeah, it definitely can. When a large portion of the budget is tied up in debt payments, there's less money left for social welfare. Things like poverty reduction programs, employment services, or public services that people rely on. So it can deepen inequality, making it harder for vulnerable groups to escape poverty. And it can slow down overall economic mobility.
Okay. So can increasing export reduce dependence on loans?
Yeah, absolutely. If a country is reliant on external borrowing, it often has to depend on those loans to keep its economy afloat. That can limit its ability to make independent economic decisions. So, yeah, it can create a cycle where the country stays vulnerable to external shocks, global market shifts, and the conditions set by those lenders.
What is the relationship between rising debt and financial uh, mismanagement?
Yeah, that's a key link. When public funds are mismanaged, whether it's through poor oversight, corruption, or just inefficient spending, debt can spiral because money that could have been used productively is wasted. That in turn pushes governments to borrow more just to fill those gaps. So mismanagement is often a big trigger for rising debt.
Okay. It's debt taken for development project always beneficial.
That's a really important nuance. Not always, no. Debt can absolutely fund valuable development like schools, hospitals, or infrastructure, but if it's not well targeted or if the projects don't yield long term returns, it can become a burden. So it really depends on the quality and planning of the investments.
What role citizen plays on solving the debt problem?
Oh, absolutely. Citizens have a huge role. They can hold their leaders accountable through voting, civic activism, and demanding transparency. They can also push for better governance, like stronger anti corruption measures or more effective budgeting. So public pressure really can drive change.
Okay, so what positive change can occur in economy and public life and country did scientifically reduce?
That's a great point. If a country can reduce its debt burden, it frees up public funds for things like health, education, and social services, which really improves quality of life. Economically, it can restore confidence, so businesses invest more, interest rates can fall, and long term growth stabilizes. So it really does bring positive ripple effects.
So my next question, how is an economy is and did continue in place?
Yeah, that's a really crucial concern. So, an economy can face a real risk of a debt spiral, where rising debt leads to high borrowing costs, which in turn makes it harder to repay. If growth slows down or if external shocks hit, like a global downturn, it can push debt even higher. So, the longer it goes unchecked, the more fragile the economy becomes.
Okay, so then they for forgiveness financial for a country.
Yeah, it definitely can be. Debt forgiveness, when international creditors or institutions write off a portion of a country's debt, can give that country breathing room to reallocate resources toward development, poverty reduction, and growth. But it usually requires tough negotiations and often comes with commitments to reform. So it's a tool, but it's not a magic fix.
Okay, so the deputy and the topic quality and distribution and give more partnership.
Of course, I'm really glad we talked about this. If you ever want to go deeper into any part, like specific examples, case studies, or global initiatives, just let me know. I'm happy to dive in more.
So the deputy and last main for discussion after the this session.
Absolutely. I think the main takeaway is that rising public debt is a complex challenge that touches on governance, economic growth, and social well being. So, sustainable solutions often involve a balance: fiscal discipline, economic reforms, and building resilience. And at the heart of it all, good governance and transparency really matter.